Hi again, let's continue with our table view project here. And, in the last episode, we displayed this array of strings in our table view. And if we test it here, we've got this, right? And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to put more information in here. Like the strings are okay, but usually you have something more that the table view is representing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to imagine this as a to-do list, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to have to-do items that you display in the table view. And these will be pretty simple. It'll just have a name for the to-do item, and then there'll be a check mark or something displaying whether or not you've completed it, okay? So what I'm going to do to get this started is I'm going to make a new class. And the reason I'm going to make a new class is because I need something to represent each to-do item. And the to-do items are more complicated than just a simple string. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new Swift file for iOS, right? And I'll call it to-do. Okay? So it'll be at to-do item.swift or to-do.swift, right? And I'll save it to my project folder. And I'm going to change this to UIKit. I don't know why it says Foundation. I think Foundation is the framework for OS 10, and UIKit is the framework for iOS, right? So there we go. And then I'll type in class. And then my class name is going to be to-do, okay? And then my class will have, we'll just keep it simple. It'll have two properties. It'll have a name, which will be a string, and a completed property, which will be a Boolean. Okay? And just to talk about this for a second here, essentially every time you create a to-do, the to-do will get a name. Okay? And so I've set this here as a string with the exclamation part. I'm not sure exactly what they call this. Essentially, this is a variable. It's not an optional, and it has to have a value. So we have to give this a value. The exclamation point is essentially saying, we have to give this a value when we create this to-do item. It isn't set here with a default value, right? And then this one is, completed as a Boolean. It's a variable. It's a type bool, which is a true or false, and it starts with a default value of false, okay? So the reason I did it this way is because the name, we don't know what the name of the to-do item is, and you'll set that when you create a new to-do, and you'll have to because, a to-do without a name is kind of useless, right? And when you're creating a new to-do, you're creating it because it's something that you're going to do, so I'm assuming that, every time you create a to-do item, its default completed state is going to be false because you haven't completed it yet. If you'd completed it, there would be no point in making a to-do, right? Or making a reminder for it. So anyway, so that's why I set this up this way. And what we need to do is we need to set up a situation where name can get its value when a to-do item is created. Okay, so every time a to-do item is created, you have to set the name. So what we'll do is we'll add an init method here, okay? And this is an initializer for this to-do item, okay? And actually what's cool about Swift is you can have multiple initializers. So you can initialize classes in different ways depending on how you want to use them. For this class, though, we just need a single initializer. And in this initializer, what I'll do is I'll include a name property here. So when you call on this, you can set a name. And what we'll do is we'll say self.name, which is the name up here, is equal to name, which is the name right here that you're passing into the initializer. So what happens is you'll have to initialize, whenever you create a to-do, you'll have to initialize it with a name, okay? And that'll satisfy this variable there, okay? And then it'll automatically have a completed property of false, okay? That'll be the default state for these to-do items. Okay, so now that we've got that, how do we use to-dos in place of these strings here? Well, I'm going to delete all the strings. And when you have an array in Swift, it has to be a type. So an array can only hold data of the same type, okay? But it can be any type. And every class you create is a type. So this class right here is actually type to do. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make this array type to do. So I'll put to do in there. And it gives me an error because to initialize an empty array with this type, what you need to do is put the parentheses on the end like that. Okay, and that'll create a new empty array with this type. Like it'll only, we're saying this array will contain to do items. Okay. So we have an error over here, but we'll fix that in a moment, right? So we've created these to-dos, and ideally we'd like our application to create them where you'll have a button or something that lets you, enter new to-dos into the list. And we'll do that in the future, but for right now, let's just insert a few default to-do items. So I'm going to scroll down to viewDidLoad, and what I'll do is I'll say array dot append, and this allows us to add a new item to an array. Okay, and it says new element is to do. It already knows that array takes to do items, and so it's expecting a to do here. So what we'll do is we'll say to do, and then when I type to do and I hit parentheses, you'll see that it gives me the initializer for to do, and it asks me to insert the name. So I'll say name is eat breakfast, and then I'll do it again. I'll say array append to do, name is brush teeth, and then append to do, name is tie shoes, right? See, I need reminders for these kind of activities, or I forget. So anyway, so we've created, we've appended 3 new to-do items to our array. So it should have 3 items in it. Number of rows in section should count the 3 items and create 3 rows in our table view. And when the table view wants to display those rows, it's going to call on the cell for row at index path, right? Okay. Now we've got an error here because when we say array index path.row, it returns a to-do item, which is not a string, right? Because this text value here expects a string. It's not giving me any help there, but this wants a string, right? So what we need to do is when we get to a to-do item, every to-do item has a completed and a name string, right? So I can put the dot here and say dot name, and then it'll take the name and put that into the text property, right? And alternately, you could write it like this. You could say, let to do, I'm doing lowercase to do here, so I'm making a variable to hold a to do item, and we could say array bracket, index path.row, and this now returns the to do item at the index path, right? So that's in to do, and then over here you could say, to do dot name. Oops, I hit return there, right? So and that would work the same way. So whichever way you like best. Maybe this is a little easier to read, but it requires more lines of code. Let's give it a test. So I'll hit the play button, and here we are. Oh, there we go. Eat breakfast, brush teeth, and tie shoes. So there's a quick example there of, using a custom class and, displaying data from the custom class in your table view. Okay? And then we'll continue with this and do some more things with it in future videos, right? So anyway, I hope that was useful, and thanks for watching.